Welcome to the fourth installment of Witch and Famous True Blood Recap. This week on True Blood, things start to get really exciting as the witchcraft and magic starts to really rock and roll. We open with Nan Flanagan chastising Bill Compton for going after some silly Wiccans. She writes them off as just a bunch of dirty hippies who make a dead bird fall off the table, and she's not impressed. However, Bill knows better because he remembers the Spanish Inquisition and Salem and the threats that these witches have posed to the vampires in the past. He reminds Nan Flanagan of these things and begs her to be able to continue with this investigation. She refuses and says she can't possibly take it to the authority, but Bill knows better. And she says, fine, just do what you have to do. Just don't make it my problem. So we're off and running. We find Marnie in this episode dreaming, restlessly, and we cut to her dream. She is in the times of the Spanish Inquisition. She is horrified as she encounters the scene of a witch literally about to be burned at the stake. The same witch which she starts to identify and recognize as the one that she's been seeing all along and starting to feel out and remember from her possessions. And she takes notice of the priest perversely taking joy in describing to the other priests the process of the witch burning at the stake and what has to happen, and that the witch can't die until her face melts off. How horrifying is this? It's absolutely atrocious. But let me remind you again that most of the most horrendous forms of torture were developed during the Inquisition to torture, maim, and kill witches, most particularly women. So, Marnie tries to have a say in this, but being that she's in the dream state, she really has no influence on this whatsoever. But she connects with the witch at the stake, and the witch at the stake recognizes her. And all she starts to do is repeat the incantation of the curse that the witch is laying, saying that it is you that will burn for the sins, not me. Fascinating stuff. So, back at the witch shop, we meet Lafayette, Jesus, and Tara, asking Marnie to reverse the spell on Eric because they fear for their lives. They know Eric's potential and what he can do. And she says, but I don't know what I said. I don't know what I did. She's nervous and antsy. And I find it interesting because Marnie herself is kind of mumbling and bumbling. She reminds me of Aunt Clara from Bewitched. And she really can't find her way. She also, in a very typical Wiccan sense, reassures them by saying, the goddess will protect us. Now listen, I've heard this line time and again. It's a very sort of let go, let God sort of thing. But true witches roll up their sleeves and are not afraid to get their hands dirty because they do what is necessary. They know what has to be done and they do it. They are not afraid of these different things. And the Wiccan law of karma, the threefold return, that really had no place in true old-fashioned witchcraft. You protected your own. So Marnie's take on the goddess will protect us is very sort of new agey and fluffy. And it goes right along with the way that she acts because Wiccans in a lot of respects, they're very eclectic in their practices. They call on gods and goddesses from various pantheons. They do whatever their heart leads them to do, and I respect that. But in true old craft, you just did what your ancestral blood told you to do. And for somebody of, let's say, an Old English witch, or in our case, a Spanish witch, you'd think she's going to be talking to, a Greek god over here, and then a Hindu goddess over here, which is very common in Wiccan circles. Not necessarily. So, we see her going through books, and she's lifting them up. And Tara's like, what's she doing? And she describes that she's looking for heat because the right spell in the book will provide some energy. Are you kidding me? Give me a break.
We're fucked.
So now, Marnie starts to get more flustered, and Tara starts to get more frustrated, and says, come on. And that little bit of passion, and that little burst of energy incites something in Marnie. She gets frustrated, and she calls out to the spirit, Spirit, why have you forsaken me? And just then, the book flies off the shelf. A spell is revealed to heal those who have drunk from the river Lethe. Those of us who know our Greek mythology know that the river Lethe is where the spirits of those who have passed on go so that the memories are washed away, so that the soul could continue on to the next life. So, we are going to go back to the river Lethe to bring back the memories that were lost. This is a very fascinating technique. The spell continues. Cast the circle in the light of the moon of Artemis, which is very interesting because we know Artemis is a maiden goddess. And if we're going to be very New Agey and Wiccan here, the maiden goddess corresponds with the waxing moon. So, if we're going to do work in the waxing of the moon, that means that the memories will start to grow back with casting this reversing spell, which is fascinating and very well done research on their part. We find our witches in the wood, casting their sacred circle of salt to protect them from the evil spirits. Pam is also present. She has absolutely no patience whatsoever and is very demanding, making Marnie very flustered and very, very nervous. She asks, please stop cursing.
Make her fucking do something.
Stop saying fuck. I can't concentrate.
Ironic. Anyway, Marnie begins her spell. She opens her book. She goes to the edge of the circle, and very interestingly, she starts to invoke north, south, east, west, north, south, east, west, not invoking with pentagrams, but invoking with the sign of the cross, which is not very Wiccan, it's very Christian. Maybe this is just because she's in the south, I don't know, but it is very interesting to think about. She goes to the edge of the circle and invokes Simone, goddess of wisdom and time. Now, it's very interesting because she has no self-confidence. She's very nervous, and she's not very powerful, if anything. Pam has no time for this, and she's like, come on, cut the crap. And Marnie, of course, is completely taken over. The book falls to the side, the wind begins to pick up, and the spirit comes through. Now, the wind picking up and the spirit coming through is very interesting because the winds are basically the ancestral memories. And it's basically the spirits that travel on the wind and start to come over and possess her. Every time the spirit comes through, there's a burst of wind. I think this is really good on the research part of Alan Ball and his team. Very, very exciting. And yes, it's great dramatic effect, but it actually is pretty significant. The witch arrives and enters and immediately starts, in Latin, to cast a spell upon Pam. And a spell that we can kind of make out to be that her flesh starts to rot from the bone. As this happens, the skin starts to sizzle and burn, and Pam is horrified and actually peels a piece of flesh from her face. The witch, completely happy with her results, leans back and merely says, behold, corruptible spirit, behold your true self. Brilliant, amazing, and yet another of the most powerful sharp-tongued, not to be messed with vampires of the land, is done with. So let's look at this, because when the old witch comes through, the power and passion and intensity of her magic is so pure that there's no questioning. I mean, my hair stands on end just watching it. Imagining what could actually be happening in the circle is incredible. This is obviously something that Marnie has yet to learn in her own practice, but also why we realize she calls out to the spirit. This is the power that she hungers for. Now, something else that I find interesting is that when the witch comes through, she invokes all of her incantations in Latin. Latin being the sacred tongue, the tongue that the church uses to invoke the divine, and basically control the divine, the same thing that the witch uses. What's interesting here is that witches back in the day were not pagans, as the Wiccans would perceive themselves to be today. They basically were Christians. They practiced Christian magic. They went to church on Sunday so that no one would question. We basically have come to learn to call this dual faith observance. They do their work out in the dark of night, and they're also at church on Sunday so that no one raises an eyebrow. This is the way that things were done, and still are done in many respects. I still go to church when I can, and go to the Latin Mass because the magic is still the same, and it's absolutely brilliant. This is going to be a really interesting story as it plays out, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here because I think we're just starting to get good. We still don't even know who this witch is. So, stay tuned for next week. I can't wait to watch. I know you can't either. Thank you so much for watching my recaps, and see you next time.